Masks and filters had been developed in both world wars, but it was in the labs of the Manhattan Project that high-efficiency particulate air filters were perfected. Initially aimed at removing radioactive material from the air, it was found that the filters were so effective they could even filter viruses. Commercially available in the 1950s, and with N95s introduced in the 90s, the technology behind masks is old, thoroughly regulated, and thoroughly understood. Masks like this were regularly used in hospitals, they were used in the SARS outbreak, and as you can see in this document from 2009, they were part of the planning for a potential viral pandemic. Masks were known to work. That's why hospitals wanted respirators and surgical masks right from the start of the pandemic. Many people believe there was a disinformation campaign aimed at preventing the general public from buying a mask. And after prominent health figures have said not just that you should not wear a mask, but there is no reason to wear a mask, there is no evidence that they work, that they can even increase your chance of being infected, now we have some health figures saying that they not only knew that masks worked when they were saying these things, but that they did not want them to be used by the people. And whether or not you think lying is justified in that circumstance, and I don't, the ongoing problem now is that this has stopped people wanting to get better masks, even though they now can. When I made videos about fabric masks, I assumed that people would start buying these better masks when they were able to, but people don't seem to be doing it. So this is a reminder. Against viruses, there are good masks. Then there are bad masks. And then there are fabric masks. These protect you against viruses, rated by government health and safety guidelines in normal times. These probably do, and are accepted in many workplaces, especially outside of Europe, mainly America. Will these protect you from a virus? Not entirely. In normal circumstances, this would never be considered safe enough for a doctor, a virologist, anyone who wanted to be protected against a virus. Then there's a massive drop in the ability to filter. These are very effective against droplets, but never considered sufficient protection against a virus when there isn't an emergency. The material doesn't filter viruses very well, and they don't have a good face seal, meaning that air can take the path of least resistance through the gaps and remain completely unfiltered. And then there's another massive drop in filtering quality, and these are a crisis imitation of a surgical mask. This is cotton close up. Commonly used in face coverings, the structure here enables it to be stretchy, which is good, because that stretchiness means it fits the shape of most faces. But the problem with that is it has many gaps that a virus can easily go in. So you can see why this isn't ideal. So why did anyone wear fabric masks? Well, it's because if you have no alternative, they're much better than nothing. They actually have at least 8 benefits, which I've covered in a different video, and they can even have a better face seal than a surgical mask. However, they're also the last resort, the worst possible option. They're meant to be used only when there's a shortage, and only until a commercial supply of masks becomes available again. And that's why it drives me crazy to see elderly people walking around still in fabric masks and surgical masks. Why are the most vulnerable people wearing the worst protection? It's because they follow the guidelines, and the guidelines haven't told them to upgrade the mask. The World Health Organization still says people should wear fabric masks, and over 60s and vulnerable people should wear surgical masks. Well, no. Here's my advice, synthesized from sources from before the pandemic, and yes, there were sources from before the pandemic. If there's a danger, wear the best protection you can, unless there's a reason not to. Now, for many people, the reason not to, initially, was shortages. At the start of the pandemic, people either couldn't get hold of a mask, or didn't want to because they thought the hospitals needed them. Alright, so is there still a shortage? No. From what I can tell, there isn't. We're no longer hearing stories of hospitals without PPE, and more reliably, we can look at the market. Prices of almost all PPE rose, and has now fallen back to pre-pandemic levels. And this is where we look at some charts. And honestly, I'm quite proud of these because I've been compiling this data over the last year. And I think it's really interesting to see. So here we've got hand sanitizer, just a small bottle. The prices here are, I'm in the UK, so they're in British pounds. That spike you see there is right on the first lockdown, and then the price trails off and becomes normal again. Here you can see the same thing happening with P3 half-face respirators. Brilliant masks, by the way. And look at this price volatility, man. It's staggering. So from £22 right up to almost £150 a mask. Now, the reason that this is interesting to us is because obviously the price gives us an indication of the availability. If demand massively outstrips supply, then people will be willing to pay a lot more for that item. So conversely, when the price drops, we can tell that there's probably an abundance of supply. And here we can see it's dropped right back down. These masks are actually now below where they used to be. And a low price is a great indication that the supply is plentiful. And something to say here is that my monitoring wasn't regular, it was sporadic and fairly frequent around dramatic times. So when you see a bend in the line, that's a definite data point. Straight parts of the line, I'm afraid, less certain, but hopefully still useful. Now, you can see respirator filters that go with those masks, matching very closely the line of the masks themselves. Isopropyl alcohol, 5 litres. Hand sanitizer, 5 litres. Now this is interesting because this line starts high. The demand was high. Now, we've seen the peak of where the public demand for PPE kicked in, and this isn't that. So I think this is hospitals seeing the pandemic coming and buying up 5 litres of hand sanitizer. Very interesting stuff. But again, you can see, I should think this is production ramping up, supply increases, and the price drops. Here, again, very interesting, N95 masks. We get the same spike in late February, just ahead of the general population panic about PPE. So that high point there is hospitals and preppers, I suppose. But actually, there's another interesting part of this line, and the more important one now. Look how low it's dropped. It's dropped right back down. And N95s, they're a good mask. I've heard that there are some low quality copies floating around at the moment, but if you can get a genuine P2 or an N95, great, wonderful stuff. And in fact, I'm staggered at how cheaply you can get a case of N95s now. Surgical masks, you can see, went on a slightly bumpy ride. Another type of half mask respirator here. Aloe vera. Now, you might think, why did aloe vera spike? It's got nothing to do with viruses, right? It's just something which makes your hands softer. The reason is the price of hand sanitizer went up. Everybody wanted hand sanitizer and they couldn't buy any. Isopropyl alcohol was still available. So everyone started buying aloe vera to mix with isopropyl alcohol and make hand sanitizer. And you can see that the price went up by more than 5 times. How crazy. And it's got nothing to do with, directly, it's got nothing to do with the pandemic. I think this is fascinating economic stuff. This is just an ingredient within something, and you can see the price rising. It's really interesting. I think so, anyway. Now here we have the most commonly used mask against viruses, an FFP3. And you can see it doesn't have a shape like all the rest of the charts. This one starts low, gets high, and then flattens out, only dropping slightly. Now, this may be because these masks are the gold standard of virus protection, and they're still in high demand. But frustratingly, it's difficult to tell, because there seems to have been some behind-the-scenes messing around with price controls. And obviously, artificial price controls destroy analysis like this. Amazon seems to have put in full-fledged price controls on masks, so this data doesn't even come from Amazon. It comes from eBay, which didn't seem to use price controls, but it did limit who was able to sell masks on their platform. And these behind-the-scenes market manipulations, price manipulations, it makes it very difficult to understand the current availability of these masks. If you compare it to the half-face respirator, you can see that this doesn't seem to have been limited in price at all, and it tells the story of availability. With the FFP3s, it's more difficult to read. And as frustrating as that is, I still think that this indicates that there is available supply, partly because of the sheer quantity that some of these retailers seem to have in stock, and partly because there are some cheaper P3s on the market. They're just not the brands that I was initially monitoring. But if you feel like this isn't strong enough evidence that the shortages on P3s has passed, it certainly has on P3 half-face respirators, and it certainly has for N95s. If hospitals were short on supply, then they could buy them at these cheap prices, same as you can. So you have plenty of options. And incidentally, these masks look different, but they actually offer the same filtration level, which is the key thing. The filters used are the same rating. Masks like this are just more durable, with removable filters, and potentially a better face seal. I think it looks kind of cool, but if you don't want to look like you're playing Fallout, this one will do fine. So the shortage seems to be over, and there's enough supply for you to have one of these masks now. But is a HEPA mask worth it? Is it really that much better than a fabric mask or a surgical mask? Yes! It's so much better. A P3 mask cuts out 99.95% of all particles. They're amazing. The way I'd put it is, virologists, doctors, they expect to walk into a room full of COVID patients and walk out and not have COVID. Yes, they have suits, behavioral procedures, hand sanitization, but the key equipment is a mask. And some people act as gatekeepers about these masks and say things like, oh, people don't know how to wear them properly. To which I say, tell them how to wear them properly. Or they say, oh, they haven't been fit tested. We go through a very rigorous fit testing. To which I say, a normal person may not wear this mask perfectly, but they may not wear their fabric mask perfectly either. So which are they going to be safer in? A bad mask that they don't wear perfectly all the time? Or a brilliant mask that they don't wear perfectly all the time? They're going to be safer in the better mask. Now there's good news, at least in the UK, we're predicted to have the top 4 vulnerable categories of people vaccinated by mid-February. And assuming the vaccine is safe and effective, this should really reduce the death rate from COVID. And that's wonderful news. And I want to stress that isolating is still the safest thing you can do, safer than going out wearing whatever mask. So if you're going to get the vaccine soon, and you're not going to come into contact with other people, you don't even need to worry about a mask. Just wait for the vaccine, I guess. But I know there are many people who have to go outside and get into contact with other people. I can think of these groups particularly. And it's these people, I think, who can benefit now from a better mask. These masks are old technology, well known and well understood. But I do want to say as well, no mask filter is 100%. You could get very unlucky. You can also still get infected by touching your nose and mouth after touching an infected surface, and maybe through your eyes. So wearing a mask isn't a panacea, and you should continue to social distance, wash your hands, and do all the other things that the health guidelines say. If your mask has worked, it'll build up virus on the outside, so only touch it by the straps and wash your hands before and after touching it. I leave my mask hanging up somewhere isolated for a while to give any virus that might be on it a chance to die off. You also can't wash these masks, as water is going to damage the filtration process. And I know this sounds like more hassle than a fabric mask, but the reason it's more hassle is they're much more effective. And in any case, the same things happen with fabric. Virus will still build up on the outside, there's still an infection risk. It's just that they're less likely to work properly in the first place. Masks with exhale valves mean that the air you breathe in is filtered, but the air you breathe out is not. And if you're infected, symptomatically or not, with an exhale valve, there's a possibility that you infect other people. This is sometimes used as another tactic to put people off buying masks, but there's no need for it to stop you getting one. If you're worried about this happening, you can buy a mask with no valve, or you can get one with a valve but tape it up, or tape a fabric square over the top. Sometimes you see doctors wearing surgical masks under HEPA masks in order to filter their exhales, which, yeah, it seems kind of janky to me, but if they do it, maybe it works. Another wonderful feature of these masks is that they can potentially last for many months. And you'll know when to stop using them, because as they block particles, they will clog up, so they'll become more and more difficult to breathe through, and eventually you won't be able to breathe through it comfortably. But before that, they actually seem to become more and more efficient at filtering, which is pretty cool. Now there's an exception to this, which is masks marked NR for non-reusable. These are designed for an 8-hour shift, and N95 masks fall into this same non-reusable category. Now, even hospitals in an emergency will reuse these masks. So, although I don't have the usual evidence behind what I'm saying here, personally, I would feel a lot safer in an old N95 than any kind of surgical mask or fabric mask with gaps around the edge and poor filtration. I'll wrap up with a couple of final thoughts. You might want to get a pulse oximeter. They also went up in price, and they're also cheap again now. You can pick one up for about £12. Now read this if you'd like to know why, but essentially, it seems that a lot of things that damage your lungs, you feel short of breath straight away. You know that your lungs are being damaged, and you go to hospital. One of the very dangerous things about coronavirus is that it seems that many people who are getting lung damage don't realize it until really late. And when they go to hospital, they find that their lungs have already been irreparably damaged. The idea with getting a pulse oximeter is that if you're worried you're infected, you can get a reading, and if your blood oxygen is surprisingly low, you know that you're in bad shape, and you'll be able to get help long before you would have done if you just had to wait to feel that you were in bad shape. So, as I was making this video, again, the BBC released this article, mainstreaming the recommendation of pulse oximeters. And while this is nice, because it gets the information out to the British public, it's kind of tragic too, because this was released on the 21st of January 2021, and it has almost exactly the same information as this article released on the 20th of April 2020. But don't worry, BBC, I'm sure 9 months isn't too important in a pandemic. I gotta be honest, I hate this drip feeding of information to the public. Oh, it's for their own good. It could have helped. It could have helped people. If there weren't enough, there could have been, one per village with a bottle of hand sanitizer next to it, something like that. Care homes could have bought one to use for the whole care home, But no, I'm sure it's better that people don't know this information. They don't know that their lungs are being silently destroyed while they're sitting at home. Good grief. But no, I suppose it's better just for people not to know what could help them until it's too late to help them. Brilliant. Brilliant. Finally, and actually related to unforgivable lateness, I've got to talk about myself and apologise. I should have made this video sooner. I was watching the supply graphs and I could see that masks were becoming available, and I knew I should tell people. And I know people knew, and this isn't necessarily some kind of savior thing, it's just initially this video was going to be called Elderly, Vulnerable, Get a Better Mask, and you'll notice it's not called that now, and that's because I didn't make this video in time. Most of those elderly and vulnerable people are now vaccinated in the UK. At least they will be by mid-February. Which, man, I'm sorry I didn't make it sooner. From mid-January, hearing about this disease in China with an R number of 4, I was researching masks night and day, with a view to helping people, and I ended up spending 6 months on it, with almost every bit of time that I had. And I know it doesn't look like it, because I didn't make very many videos, but man, each one took a lot of thought and research, and it was hard, especially at the start, because you got to remember, it was going against the World Health Organization, the media, the governments, everyone. And it was difficult to give health advice that was completely against what every authority was saying, and tell people an idea which many places were saying could kill them. People told me that I was killing grannies by telling people to wear masks because they believed all this stuff, and I think that's why I'm so wound up about it now. It was an obvious lie, and people who trusted these people who were supposed to tell them the truth when their lives were at stake, they lied to them, and man, it makes me angry. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about now. All of that is really just an excuse and a justification. So what I'm saying is, the process of making those videos was hard, and it took a lot out of me, actually. And after about 6 months, I didn't really want to make videos anymore, and I just couldn't face it. So there was a period where I guess I'll allow myself that I didn't really need to make this video, but then I did start to notice that the prices had dropped and that I should tell people to get a better mask, especially the elderly and vulnerable, and I don't know why people didn't. This idea that the vaccine is brilliant because it will massively reduce the likelihood of people to get sick. Masks massively reduce the likelihood of people to get sick. I know they're different. I just don't know why this didn't happen sooner. And I almost made this video a lot. Like, I drafted the script over and over, but the situation would keep changing. And I mean, there's thousands of words. And then the vaccine would be announced, or like lockdown things would change. Like, it would feel like the situation had changed, and then I would just be back to square one, and I'd rewrite it. And I rewrote it about 5 times. So yeah, I got kind of burned out. And then when I finally started making this video, it took me months. And I'm really sorry, I don't know how. Oh man, I know it's like a 15-minute video, but I don't know, maybe I went slowly. The point is that in the UK, a lot of the elderly have been vaccinated by now. I know in other countries, the vaccine programs are going a bit more slowly. Maybe this could help elderly and vulnerable people in those countries. But I don't know if they speak English, and in any case, those the supply graphs I have apply to the UK. So I'm a bit haunted by the idea that I could have helped people and didn't. It wasn't malicious, but I feel really bad about it. So I know I could not have said this, but I just wanted to be honest, and I wanted to say sorry. So I'm sorry. But at a minimum, maybe you can buy a mask now that'll help your children in the next pandemic. And hey, why not write on the packet that this mask filters viruses? And then even if the next pandemic is in 100 years, your grandchildren won't be so vulnerable to deception as they were this time. This was a video from The Fox in the Well, and that's it. Bye!